I thought it would be easier.
I didn't think I would be so busy.
I didn't think it would be so hard.
I thought it would end when they moved out of the house.
I thought I would get more help from my husband.
I thought it was the thing to do.
I thought it would be a fairy tale.
It's really fun.
It's totally worth it.
It's wonderful, and I'll love them forever.
We don't have enough common language to name and frame our realities as mothers, and the language we do have is either loaded with ideological baggage or lacks the richness and texture of meaning we need to express the complexity of what it's like to be a woman who is also a mother. Motherhood is definitely a role and a concept that is different for everyone.
Welcome to the Motherhood Monologues, a special KSMQ presentation. I'm your host, Stephanie Passingham. Tonight we're going to be visiting with area moms about the challenging and wonderful experience of being mothers. Our special presentation was prompted by a thought-provoking reading authored by Lynn Keekley of Mankato, Minnesota. Our special guests are Lynn Spainhauer, Mindy Carlson, Jill Louders, Kim Otten, Janet Anderson, Ricky Walters, Sandy Anderson, and Jackie Peterson.
Under the gaze of others, mothers relinquish authority to others and lose confidence in their own values. No matter how much expert opinion or friendly advice that we hear, sometimes motherhood is trial and error. You hope that the successes outweigh the failures.
Judging. I have friends who are divorcing. It's her choice. She needs to separate because she was married young and had her kids, and now she says that she didn't even want number 3 and number 4. I've been very judgmental of her. She needs to work that much harder so she doesn't look back and regret those choices. That's what I believe.
Judging. I think that parents are at fault when their kids get off track. Parents that don't set limits and follow through on discipline, it affects how their children treats other people and things. I know that peer pressure in media and society are big influences that you can't monitor, and there comes a point when the child's like 14 or 15 and you're really trying to guide them, but you have to step back and allow them to open their wings and try these things.
Judging. The older daughter seems to be the one. She was crowned as a small-town queen for the summer. I found out she was out drinking. I didn't make her turn in the crown. I should have said, "You're done," but I didn't. And some of the parents knew about the drinking, and that made me feel horrible.
Sometimes he doesn't wear his mittens or a hat if he's got a hood on, and we know this is a problem because Grandma has talked to us about it already. This woman, she walked out of the store and made a comment. "That poor little guy is gonna get so cold, he doesn't have gloves or a hat on." And then she came up to my son and said, "Are you cold, little guy? You should ask your mommy and dad to get you a hat." I was upset about that. In the moment, I felt bad. Why do people do that?
Well, thank you, gals, so much for being here tonight to talk about your motherhood experience. We have Jackie Peterson, who is a special guest today. Not only is she a mother, but she is also a family-based counselor, and she's going to share some strategies or provide some insight for us on why we do the things that we do. So we just saw a piece about judgment and the gaze of others, as it is often called, and I'm sure we have all felt it at different times in our motherhood process. And have you ever felt the gaze of others or the judgment of others, and how did that make you feel, and perhaps what did you do about it? Lynn?
I know that as a young mother, when I would take my kids out to the grocery store or something like that, I would always want them to be on their best behavior, and you could almost expect that they wouldn't be. And you feel that gaze, yeah, and you feel as if though maybe sometimes you're on stage, and I don't understand why we judge each other like that so harshly, because we're going through the same life experience. We're all doing the same thing, trying to raise our children the best that we can, yet we find ourselves being judgmental. And it is difficult when your kids are melting down and they're not doing what you expect them to do, and people are looking at you with that gaze. It's difficult, and it's not a fun situation to be in.
And I'm thinking, even when they are behaving the way we as moms think is okay, sometimes others see that as not okay. An example I'm thinking of is our oldest daughter, who's 14. We live in a community where my husband and I grew up, so everyone knows our kids. And I was informed one Sunday, my daughter was, that her eyeshadow, is your dad aware that you have that eyeshadow on? And as a mom, it didn't even occur to me to think of that. However, apparently Dad would have been concerned about that. So judgment, even on something as a mom you don't even perceive to be an issue, is kind of a challenge.
It is. And I think sometimes that we're so hard on ourselves. I think we judge ourselves or are more critical of ourselves or our own kids than we really need to be. And I think that burden is probably more on moms than it is on dads. And so I think one of the deals is to just try to be less critical and maybe less second guessing and less questioning of ourselves, and just have more confidence in our own judgment.
Now, Ricky Lynn raised the grocery store example, which many of us have been through. Has that changed over time? You have a grown daughter who has children of her own. Do you think that's any different when you had your young children as opposed to when she had her young children?
No, I don't think it's changed much over time at all. I remember her throwing a tantrum in the store, wanting something badly and just screaming, and I was just mortified, worrying about what people were thinking. And now I've had the opportunity to see my youngest granddaughter do the same thing. So the process has changed, and we also still worry about what other people are thinking about us and about our children, and if our children are misbehaving, we can't be a good mother. Now, the one thing that does change over time is that now when I am out with them, I have the opportunity to say, don't worry about that too much. You don't have to think so much about what other people are thinking. You know, just deal with your child the way you think is best, which is really nice for me as a mom to be able to do that.
And I think too, you know, I've grown into, when I'm in the grocery store and I see a mother or a father with a child who's having a meltdown, which is pretty much 100% of the time you go into the grocery store, that going up to them and just gently saying, hang in there, you know, you're doing a good job. Just that little bit of encouragement to them, because you know that they are feeling judged, whether you're even passing it or not, because they are so hard. You know, we're hard on ourselves, but to be able to just try to change that pattern a little bit by starting to be that encourager when you see that going on, and helping those parents maybe feel a little less on the spotlight.
Yeah.
I like Lynn and Sandy's comments too, and I wanted to build on that a little bit, that we are all in this together. And sometimes when I saw people, or I felt like they were giving me that look, I tried to draw them into my situation to help distract my kids, which can be an effective coping tool, and help them to see that, you know, maybe I'm being a little harsh in my judgment, and maybe this isn't as easy as it looks when you actually try to solve it yourself, you know.
Oh, good point. I think one thing that being a mom has taught me is to try to be less judging of other people.
Yes.
Because I've been there. I've been in that grocery store.
Mindy was sharing a story just before we were talking about this a little bit, and she was talking about how you were caught in a situation where a woman came down on you extremely hard, and like from 0 to 90 in a heartbeat. And it was interesting because you said the same thing, and I thought to myself, how would I have handled that right off the cuff if someone had come at me that way, so judgmental? You should share that.
Yeah,
because
tell
that
that well, what had happened was I was in the shopping center, and I have a 4- and a 6-year-old. At the time, my 4-year-old was 3. And we were just strolling around with the cart, and all of a sudden he just went, rah! Well, he had scared an elderly woman. And she turned and, don't you know how to control your children? Oh, you must not have a husband. You're one of those young moms. Oh, and dear. At the time, I was just like, thinking, he just growled. I mean, this is normal. I'm like, that's nothing, you know? And then she just kind of went on, and I really didn't know how to respond because it was so, like, just shocking, a surprise. Like, you know, that's, you know, nothing. It wasn't a full-fledged temper. It was just him being, you know, growling. So, you know, I just looked and I go, well, my kids are just fine. I'm, doing the best I can. I feel he's doing no wrong. And, other people make comments, well, you should have said something more than that. Well, at the time when you're put in that situation, how do you put it? I mean,
Kind of caught off guard.
yeah, and when you go from where you have seen him at to just a simple growl, it's okay.
And the interesting thing was that it wasn't even so much, it started out that he scared her, but it became all about you.
Yeah.
It wasn't even about the child's behavior anymore. It was all about you.
Yeah.
And making that judgment of what your life must be like.
Yeah, exactly. The most she said is, oh, can't you control him? And then right into, you must be a young mom and you don't have a husband. And,
I think that really
it's sad.
Yeah, it is very sad because I think it keys into generational things for women and just the level of sensitivity and in not forgetting the life cycle that you've left. And that's kind of been my goal, is to always remember the life cycles I've been in. I think that helps with being more gracious. And I was a young mom at one time, nursing my child with a blanket, and I had an older woman come up and say, "You young women, I can't believe you so openly doing this." And I shockingly just said, "But you see more when you go through the grocery store line in magazines." and I wanted to cry. And what I really needed at that time was an older woman to come along and say, "Good job taking care of your baby." And so I guess trying to change that, you taking that experience and saying, "Well, next time, in that next life cycle, I'm going to make sure that I'm an encourager rather than a discourager."
Yeah, definitely.
And I've wondered too why it seems like I get more pushback from the older generation. I have to try and wrap my head around how I want to say this, but it seems like the older generation expects us more and more to fail with our children. And I don't know why that is. It used to be that they say, well, I never did that as a child. And when I raised my children, I never did that. Well, I don't believe that for a minute. It's like you were saying, Ricky, I think that the generations have been the same through, but they just seem more harsh and more judgmental.
Yeah.
And I don't know why that is, that we're getting that kind of pushback from the older generation, but they really come down hard on you sometimes.
And I think it's similar to what you're talking about, where you forget a little bit what it's like to be a mom with young kids throwing a tantrum. And I remember too, at one point, not the grocery store, I do pretty good in the grocery store, but my oldest daughter does some things from time to time that I think as a mom she should be doing something different. And I'm not always real successful at being gracious about that. Often I'm quite judgmental, and it's all I can do to just not say something. And I have to remember that, I was probably in a similar position and doing similar things, but because of my experience now, I want things to be different. I want it to be easier for her and different. And
that raises an excellent point. One of the things I wanted you gals to share about is, do you think that the gaze of others comes more from strangers who have no idea what your life is like, or do you also feel that from within your own family, perhaps your own mother or other relatives who feel they have a little bit more authority to share their judgment or their advice? And how do you take that? Do you find one set of judgment or one set of gaze more critical or helpful than others?
I think it's probably more difficult to have someone a friend or a family member, be judgmental, because you're more apt, you're going to interact with them more. I mean, somebody at the grocery store, it's upsetting, but you may not see them again, or at least you don't have a relationship with them, so that that it's not, you can kind of let it roll off, hopefully. But it's tough when when you're mother-in-law or sister-in-law or somebody like that, whoever, a friend, is kind of giving you that look like, oh, what's going on with her? I have a daughter, and so this is really interesting, though. I love the idea that you brought up about being proactive and saying, hey, good job, hang in there, or we've all been there when a kid is acting up or something like that, because I'm thinking that, but I haven't actually extended that to another person, I don't think, like at a grocery store, or at church, or somewhere like that, where sometimes kids, that's another place where kids will tend to be pretty distracting sometimes.
Jackie, do you think that's effective for, and in the grocery store we may not know that child, and you talked about giving encouragement to the mother or maybe distracting the child. Is that culturally acceptable to step in and offer some help, and how is that received by other people when we try to be helpful?
Oh, I think, yes, absolutely. That's a wonderful thing to do. I mean, as a mom, I would be very relieved by just a look of understanding. Oh, yeah. Or if somebody would talk to the child, that might even intervene a little bit in the temper tantrum or whatever. But yes, I think that any amount of kindness or understanding that we can show other people is wonderful and very helpful.
And I think to remember too is kind of a related concept. I think some of our maybe female mentors, and we will maybe do the same, are kind of processing and going through an experience where they're looking at their life and they're assessing their capacity as a mom or a mother-in-law and thinking, well, I wish I would have done this differently. So from the heart, maybe they're intending to do something that's a very giving gesture for you in terms of advising or coaching, yet it's kind of a reliving of what I wish I would have done. And that's a part of our human nature, isn't it, to think about me and what I wish I would have done or what I can do to help, not necessarily about what you need or what that support could be. It's kind of an internal thing.
That's what changes the gaze too, because as I was thinking of your question, depends upon what kind of a relationship I have with that person. If I have a really great relationship with my mom or my mother-in-law and she's giving me advice, and maybe it's even at a time where tempers are a little flared, at least I will take that under advisement and say, you know, she means the best for me. But if we haven't had a really great relationship, you know, now if I'm a mother and I'm a mother-in-law now, you know, and I'm giving advice, if I'm thinking from the view of, you know what, she's really a pretty good daughter-in-law and she's a good mother and she's doing a lot of things right that I didn't do right, I could be coming at her in a judgmental way and not even know it. You know, why are you doing it that way? Gosh, we never did it that way, you know, but she may be actually doing it better. You know, it would be difficult then to step back and go, well, you know what, I can't be so harsh because she's actually doing a pretty good job. So sometimes you have to figure out what's going on underneath the gaze and what's going on underneath the judgment, and it depends on your relationship with that person.
But I think it can be a really useful conversation to have that, say, it's your mother-in-law and she did do things differently, but for you to both, if you can discuss it and not lead to an argument or either of you feeling put down, it can be a really great way to get to know each other better and to appreciate where you both came from.
And to pull them into the relationship. I know my mother used to say, honey,
to have them help you solve the problem.
I don't know what to tell you because we didn't have formula like that when I was, you know, and I'd say, well, Mom, help me out then. You've always given me good advice in the past, so let's go figure out what's the best formula out there. We're pretty smart ladies. Let's get our heads together and figure it out, you know. And you can make them useful again to you in that manner, because really it's easy for them to just say, it was so different in our day, you know, I don't know, you know, but I needed my mom, you know.
The age piece raises an interesting question. It makes me want to ask the moms who have grandchildren or are expecting grandchildren shortly, do you ever feel the gaze of others even after your children have left home?
Yeah, I think you do, and sometimes in a really positive way. People always want to credit whatever children do to the parents, and I don't know that that's always fair. And if things are going well, it feels really good, and if the children are having some struggles, then it doesn't feel as good. But I think that often though that it's an unfair gaze, that parents are engaged with their children, but they're not always responsible for them, and it's different than what that judgment will assess.
Well, I think, I'm not a grandmother yet in April, but I think I actually have spent time thinking, you know, what are the boundaries? What, you know, how much do you say or not say? I mean, I don't want to be, you know, giving too much advice or saying, you know, this is how this or that should be done, but I want to be open to being what you were talking about, you know, like putting our heads together and figuring some things out. So finding that balance is going to be an interesting thing.
Yeah, and that's been a positive, wonderful thing. And in my family, and it's a trick for me. My parenting, my biggest thing to learn was always to keep my mouth shut, that I didn't need to offer my opinions to everything. And when I did, that's when she started saying, well, Mom, what did you do? What do you think? And so then it becomes a more circular kind of relationship instead of a judgmental one.
All right. Well, motherhood also includes balancing other aspects of our lives, our other selves. Let's listen here.
It is interesting to me that the multiple roles women assume are often referred to as juggling or balancing acts, often sounding like a press release for a circus. We know that we all watch those acts in amazement, but we are all secretly waiting for her to drop the pin or take the death-defying fall.
My kids see how I work, but I feel like they only see the long hours. I don't know how I'll verbalize it, but I'm hoping they'll realize at some point not only did I go to their gymnastics and their plays and did their homework with them, even if it was horrible, I was also a full-time working mom, and not only a working mom but also a manager. It takes a lot of energy and juggling.
It is so much more work than I thought, and I feel like such a loser. I mean, where is my accomplishment? My house? Have I painted? No. Have I done anything? No, not for 2 years. But I guess if I can think about it, I can name some stuff. And then I look at him, and I feel like I have done something. What they need changes. I mean, he needs my boob for the first months, and it's always something new. You know, they say the stages are only going to be like 2 weeks long, but in those 2 weeks, the days are so stinking long.
We were out skiing one day, and a gorgeous winter day, and I felt a new life. And a voice inside said, "You're gonna be okay. Just let it be. It'll be good." My husband and I will be married for 40 years. I think a lot of parents go through those phases when they think, what are we doing together? We treat each other like crap, and we are like roommates who are taking care of kids. And it's sad.
There are so many things to balance: spouses and multiple children and parents and work. Kim, how do you approach the balancing act, and what helps keep you sane?
I think I have learned to say no to things, which is probably the biggest ticket, but it's hard because I like to do a lot of different things and I can't accomplish them all. So you have to let some of it go. And then share. I mean, I'm blessed to live by my family, so I'm able to have them help me with, now I'm in the taxiing stage of being a parent, so they can help me sometimes with those things, which is wonderful, or watching my younger ones.
That's so key, to say no, and to not only for yourself, but then for your kids to see you doing that, because they're watching how you balance things out. And I think especially if you have daughters, they're watching us to see how we balance things out. And I've always tried to be very upfront with my kids when I feel a bit overwhelmed, and try to help them see me handle the stress in a good way, but knowing that, you know, everyone has a limit. Everyone has margins they have to respect. Moms aren't, you know, out of that league, you know, but as women, we sometimes act like we don't have margins, we don't have limits. It's important to be able to say no.
Yeah, and I think also our parents our parents' generation didn't have as many things on their plate as we do, so we didn't really observe, or at least in my own home, because my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and we didn't observe that happening, so we've had to learn that on our own, our generation. So.
And it's a totally different thing when you're a single mom.
Yes.
I mean, when you're a single mom, you have so many expectations on you as it is anyway, and then maybe this is through my lens, but I tend to put more expectations on myself just because of who I am. But when you're a single mom, you're doing two roles. You know, you're having to be both parents, and that's hard enough and as it is. But when you throw in work, and you know, and I look back at my Mother's Day and I say, you know, she was a stay-at-home mom, And she was busy all the time. You can't tell me she didn't work, because she did. She just worked in the home. And so that was not any different. But, you know, I don't remember her ever doing a science fair. I don't remember her ever teaching me how to Google. I don't remember her ever telling me, don't forget to sign all of these forms so that you can use the computer access at school. And I mean, there's just so many more things now that we're having to do. And it's just crazy to think that we can do all of them perfectly, because we can't. And my children always make fun of me because I always say that I sleep standing up, and when I'm not standing up, I'm on my knees asking for more stamina. But really, that's kind of the way that I tend to run my life, is that, you know, you run until you quit, and then when you quit, you just ask for more energy. And you just believe that tomorrow's another day, and you put your minutes together until you have so many minutes, you have a day, and after a day, you have a week, and after a week, you have a month, and before you know it, your children are off to college, and you don't know where time went.
Jackie, any suggestions for helping people manage busy lives? And this happens to everyone. There are just too many things that we want to do, and only so much time in the day, and the attention we want to pay to our children in nurturing them.
Oh, yeah. There is so much. I think one of the most important things is to set priorities. Probably the most important thing in our lives and as moms is our relationship with our kids. And sometimes we're so busy running around that we don't have that relationship, and we don't nurture ourselves or our kids as much as we really want to. So I think just keep those priorities in mind. You know, how do you want your relationship with your kids to be? So I think that's probably one of the most important things.
And I think it's more challenging for your generation because of cell phones and texting and everything else, that even when I've talked with young moms, it's about that time even in the car is oftentimes spent on the cell phone talking to someone, planning, that type of thing, versus singing a song with your toddler, versus, you know, being able to have conversation even with your teenager, or the teenager might be the one who's doing the texting or on the phone. And so there are more, I think, difficulties, more bumps for younger parents to have to reach to be able to get that connecting time.
Find that quiet time.
Right, right, and to really get that white space in your calendar that says family's priority on this night. You know, that type of thing. It's been essential for us.
I have found just, you know, my children are 4 and 6, and at bedtime, my 6-year-old is just always wanting to chat. Well, to look through my day, we were together, but it was running here and there and here and there. Yeah, you had conversation, but it wasn't necessarily about how's your day, what's bothering you. It's that quick chat in between stops. And so then you get to that bedtime where it's quiet and just the two of you, and he seems wide awake, which he's not. You can see those tired eyes, but he just wants to sit and talk. So, you know, you reflect on the end of your day and hope to the next day to find that space just for an hour of, you know, what's new with you. Even though we do have that conversation, but there's way more what's new with him than you set time for. And it's heartbreaking, but I'm there for him. But it's just, there's so much more they need, and you tend to forget in your busy day-to-day life. Just at 6, they have all the knowledge in the world, according to them, and they need to share that, you know?
And don't beat yourself up. I think that's what women do sometimes in saying you don't have large spaces of time. You know, just having that 4 minutes or that 5 minutes at bedtime that you're connecting and talking about Legos.
Yeah.
It doesn't even have to be about what you're feeling or what you're thinking. It's like they are just happy to have your one-to-one undivided attention. And so I think that if we can piecemeal those and say, you know, good job, you know, I connected with my child today. And most 4-year-olds aren't going to handle an hour of our conversation.
Yeah, no. And that's what I've found at bedtime then. You know, my son will start talking, and here I am. You need to get to sleep. You need 11 hours of sleep, and here you are talking. And I find myself getting tense with him because it's bedtime. I'm supposed to have you in bed by 8, and it's going on 8:15. And really, he's sitting there talking. What's more relaxing than just hanging out? You know, so they cope easier, I think, on the sleep aspect than we feel
Yep.
that
And
they
again,
do.
that kind of expectation of others. You know, the medical community says they need 11 hours of sleep, or you know, somebody said they needed 11. So as mothers, we say, "Oh, that's my job."
Yeah. When you said, you know, just those little connections too. Maya Angelou was on Oprah one time, and she said, you know, that when someone you care about walks into a room, you know, you should light up and, you know, let them know how happy you are to see them, even if it's so maybe some of those kind of brief encounters. I mean, I think about that and say, make sure that, you know, if I'm talking to my daughter now that she lives away, you know, that in my voice on the phone is like really happy to have her call. You know, we got to grab those moments because, like you said, there's all that texting and cell phones, and it's hard, and you know, computers in kids' rooms and laptops, and it's hard to get the connection.
It's easy to get distracted. I love it when my daughter says, "Are you listening to me?" And probably I'm not. And you need to stop and do that.
As you go through your stages of life, as you're a young mother, and then, you know, mother of teenagers and getting ready for college, and then older, I'm coming into that second stage of life where I've got the older children. I'm finding out that what I had as priorities were not necessarily what are the biggest memories for them. You know, I mean, I remember just going crazy and saying, you know, we've got to get this bought and that bought for this birthday party and this science fair, and we've got to be able to put this together and get that together, and these are going to be the memories that are going to just, you know, stoke your life forever, and you're going to pass these on to your children. And as we're talking now as young adults, you know, to mom to young adult, it's like, I don't remember that the way you remember it, Mom. I remember a lot of really restless nights and a lot of sleeping and a lot of cursing under my breath because things weren't going the way I thought they would. But this was going to make a memory for these children. And I'm finding now that that's not even what they remember. They remembered the simple stuff.
I was just going to say.
They remembered the time that we were together in the van going to the Mall of America. They remember the times that we were together just, you know, having a good old time and rocking and rolling, and just things that didn't take an investment of anything more than myself, my emotion, and my time. And that was what seems to have the most staying power. And so you need to remember that, because really I want to say that to young mothers is, you know, don't put that pressure on yourself, because that's not what they're going to remember. That's not what they're going to remember.
And I think in terms of, I think about kids who are not necessarily my own, but maybe my own, or others I've known who are kind of quiet, kind of shy. And those 3-4 minute sessions are just not enough to draw out that deep emotive need or that issue that's just there, that's going to take some time. So that time, what you're saying about time is so key.
Yeah,
if
it's
you
true.
don't have that to devote, you know, you might not get access to that, and that's so important, I think, to us as moms.
And it is a balancing act, I think, for all of us. But remember, we are the balancers. So we can be in charge of that process, and we can put limits on maybe what we want to do to spend that one-on-one time with that kid and to look into their eyes. And ooh, those are golden moments.
And that's laying a foundation too, because what you're doing is so important with the kids in bed, and I know that was some of the most special time is when we'd be, but you know what you're doing is when you're doing that, you're teaching them to talk to you, and they're teaching them to open up to you and to know that you're available. And how sad it would be to think that they would say, well, I'm going to bed, I'll have to talk to Mom later because now is the time she does her paperwork. You know, I mean, you would miss that entire developmental phase of them feeling comfortable.
There's almost never that later, because it's your next day and you're up doing your new list of chores, and here we are at bedtime again. You know, so it's frustrating. And
we're talking a lot about kind of balancing the act between the nurturing piece of being a mother and kind of the external world as it comes in. I want us to explore a little bit the other selves that you all have. You all, before children, had lives. And you had hobbies, and you had interests, and you had careers. Let's talk a little bit about how you balance some of those things with your role as a mother. All of them important to varying degrees depending on, you know, how you set your priorities, but talk a little bit about how you balance being a mom, being a spouse, being a daughter, being an employee. How do you find tools to help you manage those different roles?
Something I learned a couple of years ago, I ended up leaving the workforce to actually take care of my mom. My mother developed pancreatic cancer, and she moved in with us. And there was some hard decisions, because the models that I had as women were that they did it all. They worked, they took care of their children, they took care of their parents, they did all of this. And I realized that I couldn't do it all. I could not work. I could not, outside of the home. I could not keep relationship with my children. I could not keep relationship with my husband and care for my mother. So it came for some tough decisions. And I think that goes back to that saying no. And so at that point, it was saying no to me, saying no to a career at that time. And I don't say that as a martyr. I say it's a realistic, issue that women come into having to grapple with. And something that I kept telling myself, and I'll tell clients I work with, is take the path of least regret. Think about what you're going to feel 6 months, a year from now. How is that going to feel with the decision that you're making now? And that year, my mother lived a year. That year of caring for her, of helping my children learn how to care for her, of my husband coming alongside and doing that, and us kind of sitting at the end of the night and being exhausted, but so thankful for the experience, helped me to learn that there is a time when you do have to set aside that self, those dreams. It meant, quitting a master's program. It meant setting some of those things aside, but knowing that there's other life cycles. And I've really learned to respect life cycles and live in the here and now life cycle, but plan for the next one. I can plan for the next one and dream about the next one, but still live and be present in this one. And that's taken a lot of energy to do that, but that has been a piece for me that has taught me a lot about balancing when to say no to yourself, when to say yes to yourself, and then also how to caretake for yourself during that process. And that meant not being superwoman. That meant saying to friends, I'm exhausted. I need some help. Can you sit with my mom for a while? And so there was a lot of humbling that went on with that too.
That's a good word, humbling.
Yeah,
that's a good word.
Right.
I'm going through that with my father right now because he has gone through a year-long illness. He's doing well now, but it's been a year of caretaking, and it's been a year of division, and it's been a year of deciding and prioritizing and saying, this isn't going to happen right now because this takes priority. And that is difficult when you go through that, because then you can fall into that pity party and that martyr, poor pity me type of thing. But, you have to realize you have to live in the moment. It's just like you were saying. You have to plan for the future, but you have to live here and now, And so I always say there's going to come a time where I'm going to be able to go out and do that again.
Yes.
There's going to come a time where I'm going to be able to do this. And when I actually hit that time where I get to go out and do that again because my kids are grown, am I going to be thinking about, wow, thank God I finally get to go golf? No, you know what I'm probably going to be thinking about is all the times that we had together that are gone now. It's going to be like, gosh, I remember when we used to go to the baseball games on Saturdays, and now there's no more baseball games. And now I'm in a different, and it's funny because you're going to regret those times. And if you don't live in that moment, then, like you said, you're going to take the path of the most regret because that time's going to slip past you. And then you're going to get there and go, oh my gosh, look at how fast it went. And I don't want to live that way. I'm still happy I'm not sitting in a baseball diamond right now. There's times where I'm glad I'm not sitting watching a baseball game, but I don't miss those days because I tried to take them in as much as I could. You try and live in the moment.
And I think balance and priorities are so important that we just have to take the time to decide what in our lives at that moment in time is more important. There were times where we've all given up things for our children so that we could do something for them or with them. And then there are times where we perhaps put our children to the side just a little bit so we could do something. And I think it really is a matter of what the moment is telling us and what our priority is right at that time. And you all have to balance because there are things that you cannot let go for yourself and you cannot let go for your children. And you just have to assess that in the moment.
And make that conscious choice, not feel like you were pushed into it or it just happened. Make that conscious choice. I know one of the methods I use is when I need me time. I want to be in the garden, I want to read a book. I share that interest with my daughter and try to draw her into that. And then at least we can both be doing something that I think is fun. But there is no question that motherhood requires a balancing act in our lives. But we want to include in our conversation the joys and challenges of actually being a mom. Let's take a look.
The language of motherhood within the context of life, sometimes a very complicated life, gets drowned out by the rhetoric of happiness and bliss. Poopy diapers, sassy mouths, and unappreciated efforts are not blissful, but they are life. And the joys that are found within are sometimes few and far between. However, our most vivid memories are the moments of happiness that end up in the scrapbooks of life, even if those moments were staged for a camera.
I felt like I was being a bad mother when I snooped on my kids. I wasn't necessarily being a bad mother, but I had a need to know something that would require prying into their privacy for their own benefit.
My mom is crazy. She says if my son bites me, I should bite him back. She does remind me to love him no matter what. When all I want to do is get the dishes done and he's hanging on my leg wanting me to pick him up, she reminds me that he'll only be this age once.
It's important to me that I'm there for my kids. When they're sick, when they're rotten, it's when they're rotten that they need you the most, especially when they're teenagers. They're pulling away. They need that hug, even when you don't feel like hugging them.
It's important to me that I read to my kids with enthusiasm and animation, sit on the floor and play with them, and go to the playground and run around with them, and sing to them, and go for walks, explore nature, look at the bugs. At the same time, let them have some independence, and I don't want them to forget about their imagination. I really want to foster that, and I do. I'm pretty good at that.
Well, there is no question that motherhood is challenging and probably one of the hardest things we will ever do, but there are also great joys and rewards to it. So would love for us to talk a little bit about perhaps what you experienced as one of your greatest challenges and a tool that you use to overcome it or address it. And then let's share some joys. Let's share some of the great parts of being a mom. And I don't intend for you to share necessarily dramas or terrible things that happen in your family, but I know one of my greatest challenges was right off the bat. And as a new mother, we lived in the country and my husband went right back to work right away. That sense of isolation was one of my greatest challenges when I had a newborn. And who am I going to talk to, and who am I going to, interact with when I've got this little thing that needs to be fed every 2 hours? And you work your way through that, but I did find that to be a very difficult time period right off the bat.
Well, and something, I guess, if you're talking that way, yeah, I can understand that, because for me, being a single mom, my biggest challenge is making sure the boys always have a role model. Because as a female, if I had daughters, it probably wouldn't be a concern at all, but it's always in the back of my mind as to, how I'm modeling to them, and if they have enough role models in their life, and if they're positive role models, and is there something I'm missing that I should be getting? Shouldn't they learn how to be under the hood of a car, and how do I teach them to change the oil? I don't have a clue. So, those are things I'm always worrying about and thinking about that are challenges. It's, how are they being well-rounded as male individuals in a female world? That's something I guess I deal with.
I think I was really surprised when my daughter was a freshman in college and went away, because she'd always no problem going to camp, and she was pretty independent, and she was devastated. She called 2 days after we left her at college, just sobbing, and she was so unhappy, and it took a little while, and it was something I really wasn't prepared to do. I was kind of saying, oh, well, today, if you can just get through it day by day, and then she made some friends and things got better, and but that was a shocker for me, because I didn't expect that, because Megan was always very independent, and I thought she'd be fine.
And that's different than even when I was in college, because we called after 11 o'clock at night because it was less expensive, or on the weekend, but with cell phones. With my daughters at college as well, it's like when a crisis comes up, they can call right away, and they look for that support, which obviously I'm going to give them. But I've sometimes wondered if that hinders them from problem solving on their own, because they have that instant connection. Whereas, when I was in college, I had to wait till 11 o'clock to call, or I had to wait until Saturday or Sunday to call. And so there's that rub there too, that you don't want to see your child struggle, and yet that those are the things that are going to refine them, and that we need to let them experience those as well. But
that's a great point.
I'm thinking too of what kind of ends up being a bittersweet joy. It's very important. We have 4 children. It's very important to my husband and I that we have diversity with the kids. They're also different as your children are. They enjoy different things. They excel at different things. They have deficits in different areas. Makes for a really dynamic household, and you want to encourage that. So you know they're going to make decisions and do things and say things that run counter to how you as a mom might have handled that. We talked a little bit about decision making. So it's a joy to see them express those differences, yet there's a little bit of a heartbreak too, because you know some of those decisions will lead to challenges down the road, yet you relish that idea that they are becoming independent beings, which is a really wonderful thing.
You don't relish the challenges that are coming ahead.
Well, for them I do. I really do, because that builds character.
See,
and
that's
builds
hard
strength.
for me, though. That's hard for me is what you're saying there, is the letting go and letting them fall on their face, you know, and knowing that it's a part of the growing process. That's hard for me, because we're intuitively protective, you know, and so it's hard for me to say, I know you're going to walk out there and fall on your face, and I'm going to let you do it because it's a growing experience. But the intellectual part of me knows that, but the heart part of me
And if they can fall under your own roof, you know, when they're growing up, like, you know, if they don't pay part of their cell phone bill. At our house, they have to pay into it. If they've got a cell phone, they have to pay a portion of their bill. And if they don't pay in, you know, their phone isn't going to be used. So there's a painful consequence to that. And so it's hopefully when they make some of those mistakes by using their money someplace else, then they'll learn, you know. But you brought up something that I'm wondering if some of you other women deal with, because a lot of moms my age will talk about the challenge of not having time for social, not having time for girlfriend connecting time. And when we were talking, you were mentioning about like that balance between self and giving and that type of thing. I don't know if that, I'm hoping that gets better in the next life cycle, but right now I feel like with 3 teenage daughters and a preteen son, most of my energy, which I love to give, is about emotionally connecting relationally with them. And with my husband, and there doesn't seem to be leftover time sometimes for those girlfriends. So does it get better?
You know, your girlfriends are all having the same time crunch too.
They're
all raising their kids.
Well, I'm in a book club, and we just get together once a month, and actually it's more to just hang out than it is. We talk about the book a little bit sometimes, you know, but and the age range is kind of almost like this group, you know. There's some of the people are grandmothers, and some people have little kids, and so there's a really cool perspective on different things, even about the books that we talk about. But it's just, you know, that one, you know, and sometimes I feel like that, you know, like, oh, I really shouldn't take that time, but it's, you know, it's a couple hours, and it's a really great thing.
And I found that it was really cyclical. It's like when my kids were really little, I really didn't have the time. I was working mom, and the kids had high needs, and my husband had needs, and I just didn't have much time for girlfriends. But as they got older and were 10 or 12 and into the teenagers years, my girlfriends were really wonderful support for me. They helped me through the loss of my husband and through some challenges with one of my daughters through teenage years, and were there for the fun times too. So. And now again, you know, it's like I think it just comes and goes with what's going on in life cycle.
Well, and it depends too. You know, I find that a lot of my girlfriends, I cultivated girlfriends throughout the years. It wasn't like this is the girlfriend I've had since elementary school. You know, it never happened like that. It was my kids were in baseball, and here was this lady who was really fun. And, you know, she was the one that was always whooping and hollering in the stands and having a good time, and you just knew you had something in common with that person, you know, and you'd go out of your way to develop a relationship with that person because of the fact that your kids are going to be doing things together. You guys are always going to be thrown into activities together, and so you could do things by the way. It wasn't like it's girls' night out. It's called let's go and watch our kids play baseball. You know, you might not think of that as relational time with your girlfriends, but really it is. You know, it's just you're sitting at a baseball field watching the kids, but you're still having girlfriend time.
You're at that same stage with that mother, so you do have a lot in common when, oh, well, my child did this. Well, yeah, I've been having issues there. I mean, you build this sense of friendship that really goes a long ways
And
with you.
and spans the age groups. I think of our children are similar ages,
Yes.
but you and I are not. And how interesting that you develop based on your children's
Yeah,
age.
age
more
really
than your
doesn't
own.
matter. You know, it doesn't. It's just what you have in common and what support you can give one another. So yeah, I mean, there's plenty of days where I just feel lost. Like, where did I go? You know, and then I look and there's my 2 boys and my husband. Yep, there I am. But now I'm starting to, well, let's do volleyball one night a week, and that just that hour out, it makes a whole difference. And you know,
Jackie, can you comment on that in terms of carving, as Mindy was saying, carving out time for ourselves to be us, and how that contributes to our strength as mothers?
Oh, I think it is so important. Don't lose yourself. I think we cannot lose ourselves, and to do something that is in our area of interest refreshes us, renews us. It's a breath of fresh air, whether that's education, socializing, whatever that is. I think that is so important, and it's important for our kids to see that too. So the most important person to take care of really is yourself, whenever you can, and sometimes it can come in little increments, but I think it's very important.
See, my mom was a really smart lady because she used to always have us kids in sports, and she always was one of those that had a lot of girlfriends, and they'd always be doing things together. And she used to always joke, she'd say, you know, if the women get together and if the men like each other, which is even better if your men all get along too, you know, she goes, then you get together, and that's how the barbecue was born. So, and she's right, you know, I mean, really, that's what we're looking for, is just family connectedness, but girlfriend connectedness too. And you won't get that if you are always putting others before yourself.
well, and I think you find that as a mother, when you become a mother, well, this is my job, keeping my family together. I think the stereotype of seeing the mother's duty was strictly to be that mother and good wife and clean the house. And I think you try to take all that in, and you get lost a long way, and then you find yourself just frustrated with how things are going. And you know, a lot of people think, oh, you get to be with your kids all day and it's so enjoyable. I never got to do this. But there's not a stress, but taking care of a child is like, you know, any other job, you know, but you have different stresses to that job. I mean, I think with a child you have physical, emotional, all these different strains at a time, and it is exhausting, but there's others that, you know.
And you don't get a 30-minute lunch break and a 15-minute
No.
break.
Yeah, exactly.
And
And,
so it is
you know,
important to build in that time just to be able to, especially for moms who stay home full-time. When I work with new moms, especially that are making that decision to stay home, that transition, I'll always say, give yourself about 6 months to transition with this, because your friendships are going to change, your support system is going to change, and that's not going to happen overnight. Plus, you're postpartum, you have this new baby that has changed your life, you're sleep deprived, you might be learning how to, you know, nurse your baby, you're doing all of these things at the same time. So to be gracious with yourself, you know, during that process. And I used to make a list. I'm a list maker. I like to achieve things in a day. So I would make a list, feed baby, change diaper, do dishes,
Take a
do
shower.
laundry, take a shower, take a nap, you know, change baby diaper. And sometimes I would even add things on the list that I did so I could cross them out, because that's part of how I looked at my end of my day. So it was a silly little process, but it helped me to feel like, wow, I am accomplishing something today.
yeah, and I think as a stay-at-home mom, you tend to lose your professional feel, like going out into that business world or going out to teach, you know, any occupation. You lose that sense of, well, here's Mindy today, you know, I'm the teacher. Well, at home, you're just mom, which is a great gift to have. I mean, you wouldn't change it for the world, but you tend to wish you had more of that professional field to you.
As a
More
woman.
acknowledgement, maybe?
Right. And I think as women,
You don't get raises.
you don't
when-
get raises.
when- you know, as a
I don't have
mother.
a fancy title or business card, but I think that that hits on a really tough issue of are we who we are, just being? Are we okay with just being? Or do we have to be doing something? Because when we meet somebody, it's right away, even with women. So I'm Sandy, what do you do?
Yeah.
And so I think I even have tried to, when I meet women, not say, what do you do? Because it's about just who you're meeting versus.
But see, that I mean, being in the childcare industry, I can tell you that that's something that we deal with all the time, because mothers are being, it's like you said, what do you do? Well, I'm just a mother. Right. Okay, you take out the word just, because it's just like saying, I'm a babysitter. No, I'm not. I'm a professional child care provider. Right. There's a big difference between a babysitter and a provider, and it depends on how we look and how we value ourselves. And for whatever reason, we don't feel like being a mother is as valuable as getting up, putting on a suit, and some pantyhose and shoes and heading out the door. Really, the only thing that changes between what you're doing in home with your child and what a teacher is doing in it is geography. Really, it's only geography, if you think about it.
At the same time, though, we talked about the gaze earlier. That's one thing. I've always worked. I had to work full time. I mean, I needed to, because that was important for our family to have that income and that kind of security. So it wasn't an option. And you get that too. You work. She's in daycare. Right. So, and she was in daycare starting like at 8 weeks, and if I could have had more time, it would have been great, So, I mean, I think that both sides, I mean, there's that balancing thing too, and that judgment too about saying, oh, you work full time,
And we do that not only about working, but we do it about how you birth the baby. Did you have a baby vaginally or by cesarean? And I always say we section oranges and grapefruits, we birth babies. So women who have had cesarean births, they're births, but did you breastfeed, did you not breastfeed? There's all of this area that as women we can really fall into that.
And a lot of it is stereotyping.
It goes back to the judgment, and we judge ourselves and we judge each other by what our expectations of a good mother is. And sometimes our ideas about what a good mother is are really far-fetched.
Well, we have come full circle.
Yes, we sure have.
Well, motherhood definitely is a complex experience and is different for every woman. I want to thank our moms for sharing their thoughts and experiences. Thank you to Jackie Peterson for shedding some light on kind of the social science of our behaviors. And as we try to navigate this experience, and thank you to Lynn Keekley, who shared her original script with us. We look forward to hearing comments from you, our audience, and invite you to do so at our blog at blog.ksmq.org. I'm your host, Stephanie Passingham. It's been a great evening. Let's close with these thoughts.
I think of a pond, and it is so beautiful and still. And then you throw a rock in the pond, and the ripples, and the baby is like the rock, and the ripples are all that comes out from that baby. And the waves are pretty to look at. But for the little teeny insects trying to swim against the waves, it's pretty hard. But when you are deeper in the water, looking up, it's beautiful. So I guess the deeper you are into being a parent, it's beautiful. But when you're in it, it's kind of wavy.